You are you are now live.
Okay, we are now live. Committee, just for reference, I'm expecting a phone call I have to take sometime this afternoon. So if I suddenly go black, Senator McDonald is going to take over until I can come back on. So if my face suddenly goes away, that's what's happening. Today we are here. I was hoping to get a briefing on the governor's budget, but we are not on the top of the list like the Appropriations Committee. So we do have Commissioner Gresham with us today, and I was interested in a couple things. One was when Joint Fiscal did the presentation and did the calculations on the property tax this year, there were $18 million in what was considered to be one-time funds. That was additional, basically, sales tax revenue that we felt were coming in because of the federal stimulus. It was on the bottom line, and wondering if the governor had any proposal for that in the budget. I hadn't heard anything. And then the other one was, I'd heard that the home health agencies, that there was some proposal around their provider tax, and that's always been a hot ticket. So I asked them to particularly focus on that. But again, any tax proposals, we do have the lottery and liquor coming in later today to talk to us about the gambling proposals that are in there, revenue, but any tax proposals. So Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Terrific. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I actually did come prepared today to talk about the budget, but what I was going to do is, to your point, focus on the revenue aspects of it and any curveballs or deducts or additions to the revenue end of the budget if it suits.
It's fine.
So I sent to Faith a little earlier a link to our, we call our little budget book. You may remember in past years, this is what I've used to go through the budget. And on page 19 of that link is what we call a general fund overview. And that gives you a pretty much in as clear and basic a form how we shape the budget, both from revenues that we assumed and then expenditures that we propose. So on that page 19, and I'm wondering, Faith, would it be easier for you just to put it up on the screen?
Yep, it's coming. There it is. Can we make it a little bigger, Faith?
Is this on the website also?
Yes, it is.
I don't see it on there. Is it on? I don't see anything.
It is on there.
Now, my apologies, it's not on the web page. I just got it 2 minutes ago and I can't get it up while I'm screen sharing. So I'll try to forward the email to you, the committee.
Okay, it is on screen share.
Yes, it's just not on the website.
Okay. Okay. So we can go.
So this is broken down into sources and uses, and in the Finance Committee, I think it's appropriate to focus on the sources. And what you see are predominantly current law sources of revenue. For example, at the top line there, the 1.663, that is the August e-board consensus economic forecast and revenue forecast that Jeff Carr and Tom Cavett do for us, and that is accepted by the e-board members. So that is kind of our first and largest source of revenue. What you also see right under that is the $26 million. That is the property transfer tax, part of which would be due to the general fund and current law, and part of which is comes to the general fund when we notwithstand the current law language and direct excess revenue to the general fund. So that's a total this year in FY22, we're projecting at $26 million. Underneath that, you see the direct applications that we typically take. There's nothing eyebrow raising in these. They're predominantly in line with, pardon me, with past years. The largest single source is financial regulation. That's slightly higher than FY21, albeit not much. And liquor, I know you'll have those guys in later on, but they're that direct app, we're assuming, we're forecasting will be the same as last year. There are a couple of unusual entries directly below that. You'll notice there's one entry that says unreserved from 2753. As members may remember, back in, I'm going to say 2016, we had the unpleasant realization that we had an additional week of payroll and an additional week of Medicaid payments. This is a quirk in the calendar. Every 7 years, I believe it is, there's an additional week that's in the calendar, and that we need to provide healthcare benefits to those participating in Medicaid. And in addition, we need to provide an extra payroll for state employees. So we set up a reserve fund for that reason, which was an enlightened decision in retrospect. And this will be the first year we actually use that reserve. So there is a 24 million revenue realization for the general fund. Basically, we are emptying out the reserve in the 7th year, and that will meet what will be the 27th pay period in fiscal 22 and the 53rd week of Medicaid. That is offset down below as a use. So the net to the general fund is a wash, but otherwise it would be a net $24 million higher payment. So again, that was an enlightened policy decision. The second, just below that line, you notice carry forward from fiscal 21. That is a very large number relative to past years. In past years, we've had a few million here or there to carry forward, which is you would be expect with a $1.7 billion fund. But this year, 213 million is a large number indeed. That is a combination of three things. The first and largest is the FY21 surplus that we anticipate and was determined at the E-Board meeting in January, a couple of weeks ago. They're anticipating about $160 million in addition to what was originally forecast in August.
Okay,
So-
Commissioner, before you get much further, Senator Sirotkin has a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Adam. Just educate me. Why do we have to carry forward such a large amount into FY22? Why can't we spend some of that money in FY21?
There's no reason we couldn't. The thought is that we would require 3 or whatever many months and weeks to determine how we want to spend it. And so it would be better kind of as a budget item and debated and determined during the session, and then spent during the FY22 year. But there's no definitional reason why we couldn't spend it in 21. We just thought it would be something obviously the legislature would be interested in doing.
But the 22 budget starts July 1st of
July
21.
Right.
So there's 6 months of 21 in there.
Right,
So,
but if we had an urgent need that we couldn't find federal funds to fill, that money there's a comfort level enough at this point that money is going to be there, especially on a one-time basis, that we could use some of that $200 million.
absolutely. There's no reason we couldn't spend it tomorrow if we all agreed and decided to, but we thought it would be a longer conversation, which is why we carried it.
Generally we have longer conversation in the legislature. It seems to be changing, however.
Right.
Get the money out the door quick.
Right. There is actually, as part of the budget adjustment construct, we did advocate for forming an emergency response fund that would allow us to do that. That was not with general fund money. That would have been with reverted or surplus coronavirus relief fund money. And that is currently up for debate in Senate appropriations. But yeah, we thought that this money would be better, deciding, over time and taking our time doing it. But to your point, there's no reason why we couldn't spend it immediately if we had to. So that is formed from one, the fiscal 21 surplus, above and beyond what the E-Board had forecast. Number two, there is 2 quarters of what's called FMAP money. When the federal emergency was declared back, I believe, in March, one of the things the federal government did very swiftly was they increased the federal match for state Medicaid spending. Our Medicaid program, as members know, is a federal state joint venture. Every year, the federal government tells us what % they will pick up and what % the state will pick up. That is changes every year based on a number of factors. Most importantly, it's our relative economic strength, and that would be relative to other states. Immediately when the federal emergency was required, because it was healthcare related, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid reached out to states and said they were increasing by 6.2% the federal match rate for state Medicaid spending. So for us, that meant roughly $21 to $22 million a quarter, or roughly $43-44 million for 2 quarters. And that is money that is, we are basically bringing right to the bottom line of the general fund, and we are going to carry that forward into fiscal 22. And the final component, the smallest component there, about $14 million, which is the additional property transfer tax money above the forecasted amount that we're taking in. So the total of those 3 components is roughly $213 million, and that will form in the budget the vast majority of the revenue that will be behind the governor's initiatives that you heard about predominantly in his budget speech. One-time initiatives that he hopes to invest on behalf of Vermont. So again, I mean, every year we have some carry forward. This is an unusually large amount. I thought I would highlight it. And then as you move down under sources associated with policy changes, I think that's predominantly what the committee would like to discuss. The first line item there is sports betting. That is in our budget construct. This is a familiar topic from past years. I believe Senator Sears and others have a bill circulating in the Senate to allow sports betting. It is something the administration believes should happen. That will be a general fund impact. I think because of the construct that we will use, I think we'll contract with a company and take a percentage of their sales. So liquor and lottery can speak more about that, but that will not be part of the lottery, and thus it will not go directly to the ed fund. That will go to the general fund. So we're assuming there'll be about $2.5 million of revenue there. And then next is you see Keno. We are advocating for the allowance of Keno in Vermont. That is part of the lottery, and that will be run by lottery and considered lottery games. So that revenue, approximately $3 million, will go to the education fund. We are transferring whatever revenue comes in from Keno from the education fund to the general fund. And there's a direct appropriation in the general fund to CCFAP, the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, which we have done in past years. We're trying to increase the capacity of CCFAP for more, so they can serve more children. So we're using anticipated Keno revenue to do that. And part of the reason, or a large part of the reason there, is it's not taking existing revenue source from the general fund or from the education fund. It's taking what is anticipated to be additional revenue and sending that to the general fund. There are 5 tax expenditures that you see immediately below Keno. The first one on that list will be familiar to members who have been here in past years and looked at the governor's budget. He's again asking for removing the tax on military pensions. This is a policy that is near and dear to the governor, and it's something that he's asked for, I believe, in every budget he's submitted. We believe it's a good policy that will attract retirees from the military, many of whom are middle-aged and come with skills and family. There's a small tax exemption for Vermont Guard members who are specifically on active duty, and during the time they're on active duty, I think it would pay for their living expenses. We're asking to increase the downtown and village center tax credit. This is a very popular tax credit that has a cap of $3 million, I believe. Last year, the body, or the year before, I think it was last year, the body increased that cap $400,000 to $3 million. This year, we're looking to increase that to $4.75 million. Again, this is a credit that is very popular, and we usually, in fact, always, we have more demand than we do for supply of the tax credit. So we're looking to increase the supply to meet the demand.
Madam Chair, could I ask a question? Commissioner, thank you. Commissioner, the 1.4 million for the tax exemption for military pensions, how much of that is for veterans that are already here versus your projections on people moving here?
It would be for everyone. So people who live here, as well as veterans who we anticipate will move here.
No, I understand.
Also add veterans who are here and may determine that there are other more tax-friendly states. So it's a combination. And
I understand that, but I'm trying to determine if you have any estimate on how many people might move here based on this policy.
I do not. I'll get back to you on that, Senator, but I don't have in my back pocket, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's a incentive for nurses who are here and educated here. As I'm sure the committee is aware, one of the, probably, I don't want to say the single most noticeable shortage, but certainly one of the most noticeable shortages we have in our professional workforce are nurses. We use a very large team of traveling nurses to fill that gap, which is very expensive and frankly suboptimal. Not because they don't have skills, but because it'd be better to have our own who are here permanently.
Okay.
So
Commissioner, I think Senator Bray has a question, and
yes.
maybe before you get too far away from it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Senator Bray, you're muted.
I can wait for Mr. Gresham to finish nurses. It's a question on the downtown and village tax center tax credit.
Okay.
Just below the final is a small tax credit for manufactured housing. This is predominantly, I believe, both trailer and smaller homes that are built for low and moderate income residents to provide them access to owning their own home. It would be a credit for them. So, in total, the additional revenue netted against the tax expenditures is about $800,000 of additional revenue that we anticipate to the general fund. So the total revenue sources, when you add them all up and you subtract a couple of tax expenditures here and there, the total sources are just under $2 billion. that are going into the general fund, all of which are applied to both base spending and then one-time initiatives. The one, I think, issue that is not dealt with in sources, but I think is of interest to this committee, it's a very familiar one, but you'll notice if you look under uses to base uses and policy changes about 2/3 of the way down, you'll notice in there CHSBT moved from DOC to Ed Fund. That's the Community High School of Vermont. We are again, and again, this is familiar to people who've looked at our budgets in past years. We're again advocating moving the community high school from corrections back to the Ed Fund where it was when I first got to this building years ago. We believe strongly this is part of a cradle to career. It's education. It's education. And frankly, it's pre-K through 12 education. So we believe the rightful place for that is in the Ed Fund. That would be a savings of $3.3 million to the general fund and an expenditure of an additional $3.3 million in the Ed Fund. It's net, it's a neutral move. We're not asking to spend more or less. We're just changing the funding source on it.
Okay, at this point, Senator Bray had a question and then Senator Hardy.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I have two, and because there's one showing right now. So one-time uses other, transfers to cover deficits, NRB, Forest Parks, Revolving Fund, Victims Compensation Fund. Have you looked at the NRB budget? I think they currently, Chair Snelling reported in our committee that they had currently something like a $647,000 deficit.
Yes.
This was going to put them back in the black. You might know, how long did it take them to accumulate that deficit? Is that from a single year's operation? Is that the way the books worked on them? Or could that have accumulated over multiple years?
I think, I think you were in the building 5 or 6 years ago, the last time that we changed Act 250 fees. I think that was 2016. Their revenues, as you'd imagine, shot up. I mean, I think the magnitude of the change was dramatic. It was like 50% increase in Act 250 fees. That point set them in a comfortable revenue position. And really since that year, it's been slowly but surely eroding, not so much from cost increases, more from the fact that revenue projections have underwhelmed. I should say revenue actuals have underwhelmed projections. I would say that's probably a factor of one, less activity than anticipated, and two, probably overly rosy revenue projections, probably the combination of the both. But the actual deficit situation, I think, first appeared last year. And last year, meaning FY20. And FY21, I think, is a continuation of that trend. But, there's been a kind of a downturn in the revenue coming into the Act 250 fund, which is the fund that supports NRB, for a number of years now.
Okay. And then the other question would be a tax expenditure that was on a little back where we were originally on the page. It was on the downtown and village center incentives or tax expenditures. I'm remembering from the governor's speech, he talked about expanding the TIF program, I think maybe to include smaller towns.
Right.
Can you, is that included in here, or would that be a new tax expenditure that's not reported out in this document here?
So that is not included in this document, which is focusing on general fund revenue. The TIF districts, to the extent they are created, the foregone revenue, or at least near-term foregone revenue, is foregone revenue to the education fund, not to the general fund. So that is not included in this construct. The Downtown and Village Center Tax Credit Program is entirely different from TIFs.
Okay. And is your office preparing an estimate of the ed fund impact of expansion of the TIFs as well that we'll see another day?
So the January Emergency Board meeting every year by statute provides an estimate of the so-called cost of the TIFs, which is a bit of a freighted term because many people believe that the TIFs have a short-term cost but a long-term gain. So when the TIF ends and they go about living and paying property taxes the way the rest of us do, there's actually more tax because the district has been improved. But there is an estimate of short-term TIF foregone revenue to the education fund. I believe, Madam Chair, I think you were there. I think the estimate this year was $6.5 million of foregone revenue to the ed fund. The new TIF district, I don't believe there is an estimate yet because it's not current law. So I'm afraid I can't give you that money. I mean, I'm afraid I can't give you that estimate.
All right. Well, it's good to at least know the
Yes.
magnitude of the current ones.
Yes,
Okay. Thanks very much.
you're welcome.
Senator Hardy and then Senator Sirotkin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Commissioner. I had a question about the two final tax credits in your list, or I'm not sure, the Nurse Retention Incentive Program.
Yes.
I missed what you said about that, and I'm wondering how that works. And then also the manufactured housing tax credit, is that on the manufacturing of the houses or on the sale of them once they're manufactured?
I believe that's on the sale of them, but that is a question that I will get back to you on.
Okay. And then the nurse incentive.
So that is for nurses who either are in education now or I believe are within 2 years of finishing their education. And this provides a tax exemption on income earned, I believe, during their first practice.
So once they've started practicing as a nurse, they get a tax credit or tax exemption from their income tax?
That's correct.
Okay.
I think that is the intention.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm making a note of both of these to make sure that I'm right. And one way or the other, I will get back to you.
Senator Sirotkin.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if this is an ed fund question or a general fund question, but I'll ask it regardless. In terms of foregone revenue or tax credit, I don't know what you consider the renter rebate, which I understand is in the neighborhood of $9 to $11 million. But last year at the very end, I was inquiring and I wasn't quite satisfied with the answer I got. I don't know if it was from your shop or not, but we are putting tons and tons, millions upon millions and millions of dollars to help people pay their rent. And they're very much overlapping with the people who claim renter rebate programs based upon rent paid. They are no longer paying rent for the most part. Why are we still budgeting at $9 to $11 million, that program? How could that program not go down in cost? It just defies common sense to me. And if you don't have an answer now, I just would appreciate one in due course.
So that's actually a program that I think Commissioner Bolio could tell you quite a bit more about. We recently restructured, or I don't know if restructured is the right term, but I think you may remember last year we changed that program a little bit. We moved the guidelines for qualification for rebate to the federal guidelines. to make it a little bit easier to administer. We also simplified the forms that have to be filled out. I think at this, in the old days, you needed something like 3 signatures on it, including from the landlord.
Right.
So that is a program I think that Commissioner Bolio, is near and dear to his heart. I think he can tell you more. What I can tell you is that the this year's budget for renter rebate was $9.5 million. So it is a $9.5 million line item in the general fund.
Okay, just so I'm clear, the people served by that program are very similar to the $25 million program we set up last year, and we're about to enter into something that may be $100 million program for the same people, for the same need. The calculation of the renter rebate is primarily based upon the rent you pay, which many of these people will no longer pay.
Right.
I don't understand why the cost of our state program doesn't go down with all these federal dollars being put out there for rent.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this point? I can't see everybody, so holler. Okay, then Commissioner Gresham, we're back to you.
So what I would finish up on is just kind of reviewing the property tax specific proposals in the governor's recommend. The first one that we spoke about a little bit earlier is the community high school, which would be a $3.5 or $3.3 million reduction in general fund and increase in the education fund. Keno, which is $3 million to the education fund, transferred to the general fund. We're not anticipating that would have an impact on property taxes, except to the extent that it is additional revenue that would accrue to the education fund. But there's a transfer of that additional revenue from Keno to the general fund to pay for childcare. What I didn't mention, and what Liquor and Lottery can tell you more about, is also there's an iLottery expansion, which is about $2.5 million. That would go directly to the education fund. Those are the kind of the main property tax proposals that we've put in the budget.
Okay. Have you got a projected tax rate at this point?
So our best guess, and guess is maybe the wrong term, forecast, based on the revenues that were reviewed at the E-Board and the various forces here and there in terms of in and out of the ed fund. It looks like it's at most 2 cents, and if our betting man, I'd say it'll be below that.
Okay.
And that particularly if revenues continue to surprise on the upside. So I think at this point, the likelihood of a negative surprise in the education fund for fiscal 22 is pretty minimal.
Okay. Senator Sirotkin.
Speaking of being a betting man, if when you come forward with your Keno proposal and iLottery proposal, are they something that will be in the form of legislation, or are they just going to be a line item in the budget with a sentence after them?
So we, in the language section of the budget, there is enabling language for Keno iLottery and sports betting. But my expectation is, at least with sports betting, there'll be a separate bill that will deal with sports betting. And that may in fact include Keno and iLottery, but Keno and iLottery are in the budget for the enabling legislations in the budget.
Well, that's good to hear, because Senator Sears and I have a sports betting bill in that last year was something like 20 pages long. Hate to see it in the budget. So,
No,
okay,
yeah, our anticipation is there'll be a separate bill.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Other questions right now? for the commissioner. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we're gonna go on to Corey Gustafson. Corey, yeah, you're here. There you are. Welcome.
Hi. I'm Corey Gustafson. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Vermont Health Access. I'm here to answer questions, I believe, on the home health provider tax.
Well,
that
is there
your
something
intent?
in the budget on the home health provider tax? It was mentioned in one of the briefings. And just, is there any, it's up for renewal this year.
Madam Chair, I can answer that for the commissioner if you like. That our budget construct did not call out the home health provider tax or frankly any of the provider taxes, but it is part of our revenue assumption. When you see current law revenue up there on the top line of the document that I just showed you, the provider taxes would be part of that current law revenue.
And you're presuming the same revenue that you've been seeing from the home health agencies?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, when we look at the provider
The-
tax.
I think it's also important to mention that the part of the revenue forecast, the economists forecast that. So, I'm not making the assumption, it's not the governor's assumption. It's the consensus forecast.
Okay. So anything else, Commissioner, that you think we should know in the way of revenue, expenditures, taxes?
I
Nothing.
think I pretty much exhausted my supply of interesting facts, but I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here for the next bit. So if something comes up, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Senator Hardy.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because with the home health provider tax, what I heard Commissioner Gresham say is there's not a change. You're including it in the base revenue assumptions like you always do. Is that correct? There's not a change, or is there?
No, there's not a change. We're including it. We're assuming that it continues is a better way to put it.
Okay.
Assuming
it's
that
in effect right
continues.
now, and you're assuming that it would continue as it has been.
That's correct.
Okay. And Commissioner Gustafson, from your perspective, you don't see any change to this as either, right?
We're not proposing any changes to any provider taxes. I do know that this one sunsets, so there will have to be action, but the assumption is that it will continue.
Okay, so that's why maybe because it sunsets.
Right.
Yeah, I put it on because it took several years to get in. Nolan is here. He might be able to fill us in. This is my memory. And when I came back on this committee, the provider tax for home health agencies had been being negotiated for a while. It came back, they were told to expect $80 million in costs. And there was a figure they were told to anticipate. And the actual revenue came in much higher. So the home health agencies have been asking for a change in the calculation. I'm assuming that they will this year too, given that most of them are struggling. And Nolan, can you help me
Sure.
out?
For the record, Nolan Langle, the Joint Fiscal Office. So back in 2016, there was conversations about how to recalculate the home health provider tax in a way that all the providers would be happy.
That's right.
And so we had I think it was Act 73. Actually, it was Act 134 in 2016. We told the DVA to convene a working group of the provider tax to come up with a appropriate and equitable model. And they came back with a model for what would be included in the patient revenue, what would be excluded. And the marching orders were for them to come up with a methodology and a rate that would come back net neutral than how it would have been in the absence. So it's just how you calculate it, but it would be net neutral. So when it went through, it went up the following year. I think it raised more revenue than was anticipated. And I think that was the concern. Other thing that was added in 2017 was that it would sunset. It was supposed to sunset in 2019, and then 2019 we pushed forward the sunset for 2021. So what is reason it's on the docket is because it's the revenue is assumed in the budget, but in order to make that happen, we have to put forth, push the sunset forward a few years or eliminate the sunset. Otherwise, the money goes away. So that's the concern.
Okay. And the reason that precipitated all of this is that I believe there's one, there may be more now, but the for-profits, however it was being calculated, the for-profit agencies were paying less, or
There was some concern about one particular provider that was using a methodology different than the others. And I won't go into the detail here.
into details.
But
But
part of
that
it was, yeah. And so they all came together and they came up with a methodology that they all agreed on.
Okay. Commissioner, did you have something?
Yeah, hi. So just a couple of clarifications. I heard an $80 million number. The amount
That
of
was
tax,
my memory, which is very faulty.
so the amount of tax collected is projected at about $5.8 million, and it's been in that ballpark, actually a little lower
Got the eight,
in
right?
previous years. And the other thing Nolan said is that he's absolutely right. DIVA convened a group, got input from the VNAs of Vermont and Bayada Nursing Services to consolidate, construct which services were eligible for the calculation. And so the goal, and then the rate was actually raised, but less services, and set a rate of 4.25. And that actually in the next year, it didn't produce an increase. It produced a decrease of $20,000. So it was about the same. That was kind of the intent. What's been happening since the next year, it was pretty close to the same. It went up $25,000. So back to about a 4.7 in 2019. In 2020, there was a big increase in revenues. And of course, if you have a big increase in revenues, you have a big increase. Well, big is relative, right? We have that there was the taxable services, they had about $17.6 million in increased revenues, which produced $747,000 ballpark of increased taxes. So it's that 4.25%. But that, I think that's been one of the conversations. It went up a fair bit one year, not judging what all the other expenses might be for them, but the sort of rate of taxation hasn't changed since that time. What we have done at DIVA, I will say, is that over the last 4 fiscal years, the home health agencies have gotten a 2% increase to their rates each year. So, and right now, their rates have been sort of like that, where it's just been over time. It's going way back, just addressed over time when the issue came up. We at DIVA, I haven't been in this committee, and if you've gone on other committees and have heard this, I apologize, but we've been attempting to professionalize our rate structures across the board. And home health is literally at present under consideration for producing a methodology, figuring out at what rate compared to we often try to use Medicare if possible, but any methodology we can use where it's there's a rationale behind the rate structure and sort of a repeatable way to have those rates raised or lowered as appropriate, given what the cost of providing the services. So we're in the process on the rate side. On the tax side, though, we're not thinking that we should change it again after the work that was done in 2016 into 17.
Okay, good background to have. Committee, any questions at this point? I'm pretty sure we will be hearing from the home health agencies as this comes up for renewal. And Lisa Schilling's here. Lisa, are you here for support?
Madam Chair, just while we
Yes.
have Commissioner Gustafson, could we understand the snapshot of utilization and any budget impacts?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
So in our both in our budget adjustment and in our budget proposal, there is an increase in caseload and utilization. It's actually an interesting story, though. A good question to ask. Not surprisingly, given the pandemic and some folks having a change in income, we do have had consistently more people coming on to Medicaid. So the budget proposal accounts for that. That's in the current year, like in fiscal year 21. The one thing to note though is as part of the 6.2 increase to the federal matching rate that Commissioner Gresham noted for you, we have a requirement from the federal government of continuous coverage. So right now we are not taking people off of Medicaid. Normally we do a thing called redetermination. Senator Pearson, from your House days, you know all about how hard that was many years ago for us. But we are not doing redeterminations right now as part of that 6.2% FMAP bump. Into the next fiscal year, we continue at about a similar rate, the increase in caseload and utilization, but it's a little bit of a different story, and it's definitely a little bit crystal ball. So we'll be covering this closely. The consensus forecast group will be looking at this closely, but as it stands now, we anticipate that the enrollments, so the caseload will again be dropping, but that utilization will go up. And so you have in this current year, we have the utilization up, caseload down. In the next year, where the projection at present, the best projection is caseloads dropping, utilization going up. Deferred care is one theory of the case. The other is that there might be a lot of people on the program now that might have other insurances that just haven't come off because of the continuous coverage requirement and our lack of redeterminations at present.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, Lisa, are you here for backup or do
Yeah,
you have
I
separate testimony?
apologize. She's
Yes,
the
Madam Chair.
financial director for the department. And
Yes,
we've
I
got
had that.
technical-
I assumed she
nice
was there
backup.
for backup, but wanted to
Thank you.
make sure. Okay. Committee, any other questions at this time or anything you'd like us to schedule future testimony on? I'm pretty sure someplace we'll be dealing with that sunset, but let me know. We're 10 whole minutes ahead of time, and we do have a break scheduled here. So I think if you're back by 10 minutes of 3, we'll see if Faith can drop a line to all the folks over at Liquor and Lottery, see if they can join us a few minutes early, and we'll get some details on all the new revenue sources. Okay. Okay, I think that's it then. Thank you, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner and everybody else.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, committee. I'll see you in a few minutes. Stretch, move, wake up. Okay. Oh, and shut off your audio and video.
Senator Cummings, you're muted. Senator Cummings, we can't. oh,
Okay, I am now unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, good. And it is 10 off, so we need to start. And I've got 1, 2, 3. No, I still need some more folks here. Anybody who's got their picture up that's really here, please check in. I need at least one more for a quorum. Senator Bray is here. We have our quorum. Okay, and I did say 10 off. So we are here. We're going to continue with our discussion of revenue in the budget. And since I'm still waiting, okay, we've got most of the committee here now. All right.
Madam
Commissioner-
Chair,
Yes.
the policy decisions on Keno and sports gambling, who makes those?
I believe, well, last time it came up, it was in economic development when I was there.
That's my memory too. Okay, just curious. Thank you.
And then I think it might come to us because it'll impact the revenues.
Right.
Right.
I don't know if it started elsewhere, but we had a very interesting time of break open tickets in this committee
Oh,
several years ago.
it's our favorite subject, yes. Break open tickets. And the last one that came in was the sports team. So we will keep moving. Is Commissioner Delaney with us? I see Patrick. I'm assuming that might be
Yes.
him.
That is Patrick Delaney, Commissioner
Okay.
of Liquor and Lottery. Thank you.
Okay. There you are. All right.
Present.
Welcome. Haven't
Thank you
seen
very
you
much.
in a while.
It's been a while. It's been an eventful time as time has gone by.
Yes, it has. So we're just here today to see there's several proposals that impact liquor and lottery and the revenues of the state. So we thought we would give you a chance to tell us what they are and walk us through it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Senator Cummings. Fortunately, I have Gary Kessler with us this afternoon, and Gary Kessler is the leader of the lottery team and is really much better versed in some of the details we're going to evaluate today. So I'd like to turn the microphone over to Deputy Commissioner Kessler, and he can provide you with a plethora of useful information on this topic.
Okay. Mr. Kessler, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. I do have a PowerPoint presentation I would like to share. I did communicate with Faith about that, and I sent her a copy just a moment ago. So I'll try to share my screen.
Okay.
Gary, I can't get into it. If you went afterwards, send me another copy. I just need a PDF, please.
Oh, sure. I'll change it as a PDF. When I tried to send you the actual PowerPoint, it was a little too large, I think, to make it through the system. So I'll send it as a PDF.
Thank you.
All right, so I will try to share my screen. My daughter, who's a teacher, is standing next to me. She might be able to help me. Desktop 2. Let's see. All right, let's see if it shows it. Allow Zoom to share your screen. Yes. It's resisting. Any luck, Emma? Oh, Zoom, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. And then would not be able to record the content of your screen until. Oh, so
Great.
So I would send it as a.
Oh, that'll take too long. I might have to just drop off and come back in 1 second. It says I have to quit in order to be able to display. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Sorry about the technical glitch here.
No, they are our new way of life.
Don't bet on being able to get back.
In the meantime, maybe we could ask Senator Brock how he's feeling after his vaccination yesterday. Any side effects, sir?
I don't know. It's just that I keep going to Zoom meetings, whether they're going on or not. And
Yeah.
I think it may be a side effect.
Yeah.
A little disoriented.
But actually, no, it was fine. I've had no side effects, no pain, even at the injection site, nothing. It was fine.
No.
You've been
We'll
toughened
check in
up
with
by,
Senator Kitchell tomorrow and hope for a. She had a blanket thrown over her shoulder, so I didn't know if that was a comment on her heat or how she was feeling.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm back. Faith, I see that it says I can't share my screen. The host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Let me make you co-host again.
Okay, thank you. Whoops, it's on the wrong screen.
Here.
Okay.
Right.
That
I
right
think
there.
it's that one. Yep. There you go.
Great. I think it's working
Here it
now.
goes.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, so to start, there were three proposals. They included iLottery, Keno, and sports betting, and I'll just go through each of them. If it will let me change slides. Uh-oh. All right, here we go. iLottery. Of course, now this is in the way. All right. So essentially, this is really about, iLottery is about lottery modernization. And in the end, it's hard to imagine a business that exists now that isn't available on the internet. And the lottery still is existing in a, in the physical world, not in the, in the virtual world at all, effectively. So lottery products are only purchased at a store. And really, for lottery to continue to be a viable revenue source for the state and for the education fund, we need to make the product available where people want to play it. And people are on their mobile devices all the time. And that's where they want to be able to engage with, different product purchases. And lottery is one of them. There are a number of states that have already implemented iLottery. And essentially, it allows players to be able to purchase certain lottery products online, as well as play what are called e-instant games, which are like scratch tickets, but they can be played at much lower price points because the games don't have to be printed and distributed. So they're all, again, just virtual. There are these sites already that exist that are unregulated, that Vermonters have access to and can play. And so, this would basically put us on a similar footing. And one of the other benefits of iLottery that we don't presently have is, as you may know, lottery is an anonymous purchase for people in that, it's cash over, over to a register, over a counter. We have no idea if people are playing more than they should. iLottery really provides the opportunity to give players advice about responsible gaming, and there's really ways to limit that. And I would just say, as an aside, since we've combined liquor and lottery, one of the first things we did was look at the social responsibility mission of the lottery. And in my view, we were doing a particularly poor job dealing with responsible gaming. When I arrived at the lottery office for my first day, just kind of filling in, I went and looked at the desk and there was a grant agreement there. When I read through it, I was pretty disappointed about how the money was being spent to deal with responsible and problem gambling. and quickly made some changes to that I think are much better. Really, the major change now is the money goes to pay for treatment. So anyone in Vermont who has a problem with gambling, regardless of whether it has to do with the lottery, could be casino gambling, it could be online betting, it could be sports betting, any of that, doesn't matter, they'll get treatment for free, which I think is a dramatic improvement from where the lottery was before. So I'll show you a little bit more about iLottery. This is our neighbor in New Hampshire. They actually already have implemented iLottery, sports betting, and Keno. And this is, and they've done it within the last few years. So this is the New Hampshire iLottery landing page, essentially. And I'll click through here, and it will actually bring us to the page itself on the web, and I can scroll around. But they have these e-instant games that are available, and I'm happy to jump into any one. But it lets you can see the range of play, the price points, and what they can possibly win. Essentially, they do make it clear that there's age verification required. So in order to sign up for an account on an iLottery, you have to enter information about yourself, and I'll show that a little bit in a second. And then that's verified so that we don't have underage players. Sorry for the scrolling here. But one of the other, in addition to the e-instant games, in New Hampshire, they've already implemented the ability to buy Powerball and Mega Millions online. I'm sorry, I see a question.
I cannot see hands, so holler if you have a question.
I think it's muted. The person is muted. I can't.
Question.
Okay, Senator Sirotkin.
Could you go back to the first slide for a second?
So the first slide, I will try. Let's see. I had it. Is that it?
Yeah. So in the fourth bullet implies that because we don't have iLottery, we're expecting our lottery profits or sales to go down in this COVID environment. Do you know by how much?
So this specifically relates to last spring when we were on course to have record sales of lottery products, but as a result of the stay home, stay safe order, people did stay home, which was good. Convenience stores, some of them shut down, some didn't want to deal with cash, some did not want to sell lottery products during that time period, at least at the beginning of the pandemic. And we saw a dramatic shift in a negative way in revenue for about 6 weeks. Revenue was down significantly. So by the end of the fiscal year, we had not reached that sales goal of a new record. And it was fairly significant. It was millions of dollars in reduced sales.
Could you be specific as to like either last year or this coming year, what's projected in lottery sales versus what, and how much has it been downgraded as a result of COVID?
So it was the downgrade happened more at the start of the pandemic. So last year we did not reach the same level of revenue as we had the previous year, which was a record. So we fell below that.
Can you give me some numbers?
Sure, it was, and I don't, unfortunately, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Brian, can you help me with that, please?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Brian Evans, Financial Director. When we had the first stay safe, stay home order, we dropped about 6%, but we were up. So it's kind of difficult to actually pinpoint that exact down, but over that first few week period, we were down about 6% over the previous year's sales, which we were already up on. Total profit numbers for the transfer to the Ed Fund, we estimate it was around $1 million that we lost during that period of shutdown that would have been transferred over to the Ed Fund.
So is that in the course of, I guess in the course of a fiscal year, this recent fiscal year we're in, COVID has unexpectedly continued throughout the entire fiscal year. Is there a number, just a guesstimate of how much we're losing as a result of COVID from the lottery revenues?
So I want to be clear that the revenue loss related to that particular 6 week time period. We have not we have increased sales this year. And I would expect, based on assuming we don't have another severe shutdown, which doesn't look likely, that we will have a record year as far as sales and revenue go for the education fund. That's
Okay.
how it looks right now.
Okay, thank you. Could you just give me a number as to how much we get in a fiscal year from the lottery?
I expect this year, based on where sales are now, typically it's been in the mid to high $20 million range over the last few years. I expect this next year, and I don't want to jinx it, but I suspect we'll be at 30 million or a bit more based on present sales levels.
And if we go to iLottery, do you have a projection?
I would project, based on the sales that we've seen in New Hampshire as well as in other states, that in the first full year of implementation, we're likely to generate, and I have a slide for that, $2 to $3 million more revenue over what we're already making. And in addition, that number is just going to grow because the online play just attracts a different demographic that doesn't presently carry cash. So I have children, maybe like some of you, that are in their 20s. And if you ask them to borrow money, they can Venmo it to you. They can use PayPal. They can, tap their phone or their smartwatch. But if you want cash, you're out of luck. They mostly just don't have cash. So that excludes them from playing lottery products because it requires cash. So we're losing a very large demographic that may well be interested, but doesn't carry money like maybe people from an older generation do.
Okay, so and we just had Commissioner Gresham, and he had two ups in there: $3 million for Keno and $2.5 million in sports betting. Where in the budget is this $2 million increase you're projecting from the iLottery?
I would have to ask the specific location from Commissioner Gresham. I did share that with him, and that's where this the particular provision that would allow iLottery, I believe, is where it was, but I don't have the section number in front of me. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I'm happy to show a little more here, but on
That's fine. Any other questions?
Yes,
I am not seeing.
I am curious if the iLottery, maybe you're about to cover this, like, can I go on the New Hampshire site and play a New Hampshire lottery game while I'm staying in Vermont?
You cannot. All the games are geo-fenced, which would be the same for sports betting as well. So, if you happen to live maybe right across the river in Vermont from New Hampshire, and that's us, you're right on the banks of the river, you might be able to play. Theoretically, that shouldn't work, but the games are geo-fenced, so you have to actually be in the state. If you wanted to go to the site and play the games in a demo format, the e-instant games, you could do that as a demo just to see what they play like. Great. So this is how account registration works. You need to obviously register for an account and fund it. They use this information with a third-party company that verifies that you're actually a real person and that you're of age to be able to play the lottery. So that is one of the safeguards that is built into the iLottery system. I mentioned that responsible play, problem gambling is part of the iLottery ecosystem. There are all kinds of limits that can be placed into the system, both by the lottery as well as by players themselves. And I'll go to the next page here, the next slide, so you can see what those are. You can have a deposit limit, purchasing limits, loss limits, limits of the amount of time you play. If you want to make changes to those, you have built-in cool-off periods that don't allow the changes to be made for 24 hours, for example. You can exclude yourself from being able to play as well. So those are all options. Also, if we see people are playing in a way that doesn't seem responsible, we can send them as part of this. They automatically would be sent responsible gaming messages that would, could refer them to the free treatment that we're providing. And in addition, just, get them thinking about whether they may have a gambling problem or not. So that's all pluses over what we have now, where somebody goes to a convenience store and buys tickets and they buy as many as they like. And if the convenience store is concerned, they go to a different convenience store. So that's the little dashboard on the responsible gaming. Here's the projections that we had provided. Again, $2 to $3 million roughly the first year. But the experience in other states that have had iLottery for several years find that this number just continues to increase as players become more aware of it and get involved with it. And I think we could expect down the line that this could be half the revenue of what the lottery is generating now. So something in the $12 to $15 million range as we go further out years into the future.
Excuse me.
I have a notice that says I have 2 participants with their hands up, but I don't know who you are, so.
I see Senator Sorokin still, and Senator Hardy has her hand up as well.
Okay, Senator Hardy. Senator Sorokin, is that a new or old hand?
It's an old hand, but I have a new hand coming.
Okay, well, we'll go to Senator Hardy and then we'll go to your old hand. All
Okay.
right.
Well, I appreciate the responsible gaming abilities of the platform. As Senator Sorokin probably remembers last year with his bill on the sports betting, I was really concerned with the possibility of increasing problem gambling. So I really like these features on the iLottery thing. Is there a way that the system cuts people off if they see that somebody is playing too much? Or is it all just sort of you set your own limits and that those limits, if you're playing within your own limits, you're okay? Or does the system provide some kind of limits for you?
So it's both. So the system is very configurable. We could set limits to maximum deposits per week or per month or per day. All those are configurable by the lottery. And so that provides a limit right there. People can have self-imposed limits. So there's 2 components to it. There's the self-imposed limits that people want to put on to limit how much they play. And the lottery can also have limits and say, you can't lose more than $50 or $100 in a day before you can't play anymore.
Okay, great, thank you.
So my question was, again, back to the first slide, Senator Pearson asked the question of whether you could do this online over in New Hampshire, and you said no. But I think your first slide said similar unregulated games are available now for those Vermonters that want to play them. So maybe you can't go on to the New Hampshire lottery site, but there's comparable games that people can play right now over the internet?
Absolutely. So there are comparable games. They're not based in the United States, but the internet is the World Wide Web, so people can play, in other places. And the issue there is much like the issue around sports betting, which is it's unregulated. These providers are offshore. You don't know where. You're providing them with personal information that they could use in other ways or sell. They don't care about age restrictions. They'll let anybody play who wants to play in the end. And there's no guarantee that someone who plays on the site will actually get paid in the end, which has been one of the criticisms with some of the offshore sports betting. You can put money in, but you can't get money out in the end. And so that's a continuing concern for people that do play on these unregulated platforms, essentially.
So Gary, we did fantasy sports a few years ago, and there's a lot of similarities here because I remember getting up on the floor of the Senate saying 80,000 Vermonters are already playing fantasy sports, and why shouldn't we regulate it in some way because there are some abuses. Are you familiar with that whole issue, and are there lessons we can draw from them from that arena?
I wasn't involved in the discussion when that came up. I'm somewhat familiar with them, but I think the issues are the same. I mean, it's back to providing protection to the players, and in a regulated environment. And we could analogize this to cannabis as well. In a regulated environment, people can be sure about what they're going to get. in the end. In an unregulated environment, it's just that it's unregulated, and things happen, and you don't have anyone to complain to if you don't like how it works out for you in the end. But if we regulate it, not only to have people have someplace they can complain if there's a problem, and it's going to be to a Vermonter who works at the lottery. So you're more likely to get an outcome. And if they don't like our response, I suppose they can complain to their legislators. And I know that many do that if they're not satisfied with how we're addressing it. So I just think there's a lot more protections.
That's not going to sell your bill.
What's that? That's not going to sell my bill. Sorry. But I hope that the idea that, that the revenue will actually stay in Vermont and benefit programs that we all want the money to go to. I think that should be one of the, big selling points in the end, as opposed to the money going to some offshore entity where they keep the profit, they rig the games, they can do whatever they want. I will say that you can be sure that if we're running the iLottery games, that they'll be legitimate. If there's a payout percentage that's advertised, that will be the payout percentage. It's not like a rigged slot machine. Whatever's advertised as what the payout percentage will be, that will be how the games will be. So I just think it provides protection to the participants and revenue to the state at the same time. So I'll go on. Is that any other questions about iLottery? Okay.
Folks, are there anybody else with questions? Okay, we'll keep going.
Okay, so I will talk briefly about Keno. I don't know if you're familiar with Keno, but I will eventually show you a Keno bet sheet. But this game can be configured in multiple different ways. I'll show you how New Hampshire is configuring it. But Keno is more of a socially played game, often played in bars and restaurants. It keeps people in the bars and restaurants, I think, to some level, and that there's some entertainment going on. It doesn't cost the bar or restaurant any money. In fact, it's a revenue generator for those bars and restaurants. I'm sure they would appreciate the now. Commissioner Delaney talked about where this would fit. Obviously, a high-end restaurant, white tablecloth restaurant, might not have Keno, but a lot of more family type establishments could, and it certainly would be up to the establishment whether they wanted to have Keno in their establishment or not. We would offer it to them as an opportunity to provide entertainment to their customers and also to generate revenue for themselves, because they make a percentage of the sales, just like a lottery retailer does. So New Hampshire, again, state next door that has Keno. Massachusetts has Keno. They're popular games. Some people say it's a game that's been around for a while. That doesn't reduce its popularity, I don't think. And you can see there the hours when New Hampshire runs it. That's all, again, totally in the lottery's control. How frequently we have drawings. 5 minutes is fairly common, but it could be 6 minutes or 10 minutes. The idea is to keep the players engaged. And then the hours that the games are run, they run it from 11:05, because running them earlier, there just really aren't players that are in rest at that point that want to play. But it's all automated, and you can adjust the times. And this is this describes how to play Keno, and this is the Keno play sheet. So it's pretty straightforward. Can also be done without the sheet. On the video terminal as well. So it's a terminal in small terminal. It's not like a big lottery vending machine. It's much smaller than that, and it gets set up in the location, maybe in the lobby, and people can play and then sit down and have their meal or have a drink or whatever it may be, and their numbers come up on a screen and they can see if they've won. And there's lots of different ways to win and lots of different prizes. I will go back one and I can bring you to this is the actual live site for New Hampshire that I think you can see. Can you see it, or is it just coming up on my screen?
No, we can see it.
Oh, you can. Okay. Yep. So it shows the odds. If you were to pick the 12-spot game and you out of the 80 numbers you pick 12 that win, the prize is $1 million.
Okay, we may not have that. We have Keno 603. Looks like the opening screen.
Pull this down. Is that visible now?
Don't see anything. No.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. I don't know why it's not, why the link isn't coming through when I click on it, but when I send it over, you'd be able to see it. Anyway,
Okay, now we've got how to play.
how to play, right? And that basically shows you what the wager looks like, the range you could wager, how many draws you want to wager. Often people will, bet the next 5 draws, which, that's the next 25 minutes worth of draws, or the next 10 draws. And they can bet from $1 per draw, up to whatever we want to set the limit to. And then they pick how many numbers they want to bet. And then the payout is based on how many numbers they've bet, if those numbers come up, and how much they bet. So that's more or less how the game works. Sorry, the link doesn't work. It does open for me. I don't know why it's not, why you can't see it when it comes up. So I'll just go here to talk about the projections. I think, again, talking about the first full year, one of the startup issues will be, working with bars and restaurants, as well as lottery retailers, to have this game offered. So there will be some time in rolling the game out, and that we'll have to have an agreement with those bars and restaurants, and then we'll have to have the equipment installed for the game to start off. So again, the first year looking at $2 to $3 million, but based on sales in other states, that would increase in future years. So are there any questions about Keno before I go on to the sports betting?
It's not too dissimilar in complexity to bingo, right?
It is very similar. Yes, that's often analogized to bingo. And just for the committee's information, presently there's break open tickets, which is another form of gambling that is very, very unregulated, essentially. And it takes place mostly in clubs, fraternal organizations, and the money again just goes in cash across a bar, and it's supposed to go to a charitable entity. But we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen in some of the articles that have been written, there were some specifically in 7 days, that really an expose about where some of this money is going or isn't going in the end. And it's ending up in people's pockets. When our investigators have had complaints and we've investigated, we have found many violations of people stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from what were supposed to be charitable organizations. Again, I can guarantee, just like with the odds in the iLottery, that if the lottery is involved with Keno, the money that is generated through it will go to the education fund, if that's where you all want it to go. But it won't disappear, essentially, as has often happened with the break open tickets that are sold. So on
Any
to
other
sports.
questions?
Yes. I see
Not
Senator
hearing any.
McDonald has a question.
Senator McDonald.
Did I miss it? Are you recommending and we discontinue break open tickets for the many reasons you just gave us?
Well, that's certainly up to you. I mean, it is unregulated gambling. It's always. I didn't know anything about break open tickets 5 years ago when I joined the liquor department at the time, Department of Liquor Control. I learned about them fairly quickly, and I was quite surprised at the amount of money that is spent on break open tickets, and that it's just basically just unregulated effectively. That we have asked, the Commissioner Delaney and I have asked over the years, and we have received additional legislative authority to get a better handle on what's going on the break open ticket, get a more full picture of how the games work and how much money is potentially involved with this. But it doesn't necessarily make the games. We're not regulating them in the end. And it's way too easy for an entity to buy a legitimate game from a Vermont wholesaler and then buy exactly the same game somewhere else, not through the wholesaler, and sell that too, and be able to just keep the proceeds. And we've seen indications of that through the investigations that we've done and the cases that have been prosecuted by state's attorney's offices, and some that there hasn't been a prosecution, but have been very concerning, where a bar just opened a charity in its own name, essentially, and said that it was giving money to charities. But when 7 Days did the checking, they found out those charities had never received any money from that organization. So what happened with the money? No one knows. In the end, maybe they're still holding it. I think that's what they they said. But of course, what they said to the reporter and what actually happened were not, not the same. And we've done investigations with our staff to try to get a better handle on it.
So, Madam Chair, it sounds like the witness is a quick learner.
No, I don't know if 5 years makes me a quick learner, but in any event, it just, it was clearly, it's clearly there are problems associated with it. There's no question about it. And I think you would hear from some of the fraternal organizations that the money does go to do some good in their communities. I think it really, depends on the organization in the end and how they're managing it. But,
thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe we'll take some time, another time, we'll follow up on some of these.
Okay.
So sports betting, that is really taken off in the last few years. Again, New Hampshire has it, and I'll show a slide with their landing page. But Massachusetts and New York are working on legalization of sports betting, and I heard a conference today. They're saying they thought Massachusetts would have something this session in New York as well. I expect we'll be surrounded by states that have sports betting. Again, sports betting can be played now by Vermonters, just in an unregulated environment, offshore entities that are offering this to people, and the same issues. They can't be sure that they're going to be able to get their winnings if they do win, and they provide personal financial information that may be compromised as part of that. And finally, there's no revenue benefit to the state through sports betting that is conducted through these offshore channels. One thing that has been a noticeable issue in New York is that sports betting is legal in New Jersey, and there's a large parking area right over the bridge in New Jersey that is regularly full of New Yorkers who commute over there to get on their mobile device and place their sports bets. So there's a lot of traffic and a lot of money that is just going across into New Jersey for sports betting. I think that's one of the reasons New York is looking at legalizing it.
That was my next question. Could I just drive over and park somewhere in New Hampshire and play?
Absolutely.
So it's really what cell tower my device is pinging off of, right?
That is essentially correct. It may also use the GPS in your mobile device, and it may require that be enabled so that they can use that to geofence as well. So the cell tower is part of it, but also the actual information of where your mobile device is located at any particular time. But you could easily go to New Hampshire and you could bet there. And the companies that are engaged with this talk about this as a good attraction for tourists. When people come here to ski on the weekend, if they want to bet on the Super Bowl, they could do so while they're in Vermont. Otherwise, they can drive to New Hampshire, or they can try to place their bet before they leave their home state where sports betting might be legal. But that's certainly a pitch they've made in conversations with them. So as sports betting would mostly be conducted through the internet, so that would be a mobile device or a computer, but it could also be omni-channel, which New Hampshire is offering. That includes, could be done through the lottery channel. Those tend to be simpler sorts of bets, and usually some kind of a parlay bet, which is on multiple outcomes and on a particular game weekend. And then New Hampshire is also implementing brick and mortar sports books as well. So these are in-person locations people can go to place their bet and maybe see the games on TV at the same time. So that's another possible channel. But really, to start, we would be focusing on the internet-based channel, and there are quite a few companies.
Has a question.
Yes.
You may already have answered this, and I may have missed it, but an individual who does not live in Vermont, but is in Vermont for a period of time, can engage in sports betting or what have you. When they leave Vermont to go back to their residence, can they continue with the transaction, such as collection of winnings?
Yes. So these companies that are that have created platforms for sports betting, they're in all the states that are legal, and you set up a wallet on their service, and that money goes to your wallet. Even if you're out of state, you can, the money is yours. You can claim it. So you could go drive to New Hampshire, place a bet on the Super Bowl, and drive back to Vermont, and you'd still be able to check your account in Vermont. You wouldn't be able to place a new bet because you're not in New Hampshire. But that money's your money. And when you fund your account, that's your money. And again, with these companies where it's in the regulated realm, they pay out their winners. So if you ask for your money, you get your money transferred to your bank account of choice, or however you're going to get the money.
Has any state, for example, that prohibits gambling raised an objection? Is there any legal history of the correctness of those positions?
So there was a case that came out recently related to the Wire Act. There was some, under the last federal administration, there was a reinterpretation of the language in the Wire Act in an effort to prevent sports betting, basically from migrating outside casinos. Mr. Adelson, who passed away recently, was a big advocate of not allowing this sports betting to take place online. I believe the case was won by the state of New Hampshire and their vendor. So I think it's not really an issue now, and I think that it really wasn't a proper interpretation of the language in the Wire Act. So basically any lottery activity Vermont joined that lawsuit as an amicus because all lottery activity is being done over a wire, essentially, one or another. If you go to a lottery retailer and you buy a ticket, information is being transmitted to the lottery gaming system through a wire of one kind or another. It may be through the internet, it may be through a cellular service. So that potentially the interpretation that had been put out could have potentially prevented lottery activities from continuing. The Justice Department eventually said that wasn't their intention, but it certainly made any state with a lottery concerned about that.
Good. Thank you.
Senator Sorokin has his hand up.
Madam Chair, I want to just touch on taxation for a second. Have any states sought to tax realistically or whatever their legalized sports betting winnings of their residents? And is that another potential source of revenue for Vermont?
That would be, there's an expectation. Again, if you were to go down to Connecticut this weekend and visited one of the casinos and you won a whole bunch of money, the expectation is that you would report that on your taxes. And they may, if you won a lot of money, I'm sure they would take your information and provide the appropriate documentation, which we do at the lottery as well. So if you win over, $500, we are 1099 you basically at the end of the year.
So we would do something similar to that. If you had large winnings, we could set that at whatever level. You have all the data and information from the online bets and payouts within reason. If there was some people who hit some long odd horse race or something like that, you could send a 1099 out.
Absolutely. And they may have losses that they could demonstrate as well through this to offset that, but yes.
Nobody loses, do they?
Of course not.
Well, we don't get that $20 to $30 million that we put in the ed fund if people didn't lose. So that's built into the games. Are there more questions? I'll keep going if
Yeah, I'm not seeing any, but I can't see anyone, so.
I'll keep my eyes open on anyone who has one. So legalized sports betting, again, just like we talked about with iLottery, there's age verification process that anybody who signs up goes through. And I've talked to the industry about problem gambling protections as well for people that are exhibiting concerns. I see Senator Bray has his hand up.
Senator Bray.
Thank you. You had mentioned the contribution to the Ed Fund. So I'm just brushing up on my numbers. When people ask me about the lottery, I say basically it's $120 million worth of sales. And of that, about 60 is commissions and 30 is to the Ed Fund. Actually, that math doesn't work. I'm trying to think of what the numbers are. Can you review?
Sure.
Oh, prizes. Prizes would be the balance. 60 would be prizes. Yeah. 60 out of 120, 60 in prizes, and the 60 remaining, 30 would be commissions and 30 to the Ed Fund.
Right. It really it varies a lot by game. So certain games like Powerball Mega Millions, which we just saw really large jackpots in those games, the profit ratio or percentage on those games is much higher than, say, our scratch games, which are closer to 80% return of players' money. So there's less money in profit that comes from those games. I do expect this year that our sales will be closer to $140 million in the end. But as you said, the majority of the money is returned to players. A percentage goes to our retail partners, and then we also have to pay for the printing of the tickets and operation of the lottery, including staff costs. And then the money that's left after that goes to the education fund. I will say that the Vermont Lottery is one of the smallest as far as staffing goes in the country, and certainly one of the leanest lotteries. On a sales basis, we're certainly one of the smaller lotteries. On a per capita basis, which is a better way to look at it and equalizes the numbers based on population, we're actually right about in the middle of state lotteries. So we're in the 25, 26 spot on a per capita basis. And some of those lotteries do offer these, some of these other opportunities, again, that Vermont doesn't presently offer. So that will impact that as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I will move on here, and this is the New Hampshire page that is the landing page when you want to place your bet. And then I don't think I did have and I'll try again. This is a hot link, and it does go. Can you see that page now, or are you still just seeing the PowerPoint?
We're still seeing a bet.cheer.
I don't know why this isn't showing up. Let's see. Stop
share.
share.
Bet now.
Yeah, well, it's back to that, right? I was showing you the actual landing page on DraftKings. So New Hampshire has an unusual arrangement in that they're a one, but it's a very good financial arrangement. They have one vendor that provides the online, and it's DraftKings Sportsbook. And I have the page up here, and it's on my screen, so I don't know why you're not seeing it. Maybe when I'm done with the presentation, I'll close it out and I'll see if I can just show you that screen, which I have up now. But it shows you, games that are coming up that you can bet on, soccer matches and other things that are in there, and that you would see if you were to log onto their system. And I will, when I send the PowerPoint over, I think the links will be in there. And as Senator Sorokin mentioned, it's not hard to find if you want to bet on sports. And Senator Sears did tell me last year in a conversation that he wanted to see what this unregulated market looked at. So he visited some of these sites. But you can see there that, it's a Google search away. Just put in online sports betting, and links come up where you could go, being a Vermonter. And it's not illegal for a Vermonter to bet on these. But you just don't know who you're betting with, and whether you'll get paid, and what will happen with the information. But it's easily findable. And I think people would prefer to bet with a known entity, honestly, rather than doing it this way, because they're more likely to get paid at the end of the day. And as far as revenue projection goes, $2 to $3.2 million in the first full year, and I would expect that would grow. One of the benefits of working with one of the national companies is, again, when people come here for a weekend, whether it's in the winter or any other time of the year, they can open up their mobile application, and it will see they're in a legal state, and they'll be able to go ahead and bet on that, through that application. So that's another plus. And again, I see Senator Sorokin has a question.
Yeah,
I still can't see you.
Oh,
I'm sorry. You made a comment that going to one of these online sites is not illegal. Is there no illegality in on a federal level or state level, or anything in terms of betting online, Costa Rica or whatever?
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything that would prohibit someone from going to a website and betting. And there may be some prohibition. I'm not sure. If there's a federal one, I'm not aware of it. Again,
I thought we had a general law in Vermont that prohibited gambling.
In Vermont.
Lottery from being involved with sports betting. There is a provision.
Oh, lottery is not betting.
No,
We defined, or not gambling. I remember that discussion. I think when we were looking at the fantasy sports, what we heard was it might be illegal, but there's absolutely no way we can monitor and enforce what people are doing in their living room on Sunday afternoon.
Right, but so I'm asking that same question on online sports betting. I thought our general prohibition of gambling would make someone like one of us placing a bet offshore an illegal act in the state of Vermont.
Can't be offshore and in the state of Vermont.
Again, I don't know where we're placing the bet. We're in our living room, but that's just a question for Gary. Is that gambling prohibition in our state statute of a technical violation if we make an offshore bet online while we're physically present in Vermont?
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I don't know specifically whether it does or doesn't. I don't know. Can you see the screen now? Can you see the DraftKings screen?
Yes.
Michaels, I remember the discussion on fantasy sports. It was, we had to define the lottery as not gambling, and we would have had to define fantasy sports. Now we can see it as not gambling in order to make it illegal, or we have to do away with that prohibition.
Right. I think you're right. I think we made an exception from the gambling law for fantasy sports. Right. Yep.
But they can't, no one
You couldn't enforce it anyhow,
can
but
enforce it, so
Well,
write what you want.
I apologize that the presentation I just did, you didn't get to see it in full screen. I'm sorry, but you will get it. I intended to show screen. Apparently, I didn't have the right number selected. So this is the
I
draft.
have a full screen.
Oh, when I was showing the PowerPoint, you could see.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why I couldn't see members of the committee.
Okay. Can you see the DraftKings landing page now?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's there's where you could go to to make your bet on any of these particular sports. This is the lottery Keno page. Is that showing with the different odds and different bets?
Yes.
Okay, so that'll all be embedded in there, and then this is their iLottery page. That's, you can buy Powerball or Mega Millions tickets through the iLottery portal. And I know if we were to do this in Vermont, we would also add some of the other draw games that we sell, like Fast Play and Fast Play Progressive, Mega Millions, which is our Mega Bucks, which is our tri-state game, and our daily numbers games could also be on here, in addition to the e-instant games. So that is basically the presentation. I think in the first year, you could be looking at something like $6 to $8 or $9 million in additional revenue, and I think that would continue to increase, especially. And I can stop sharing my screen. Let's see. Well, maybe I can.
We're not seeing your screen.
Okay, good.
We're seeing you
Oh,
and
okay.
each other.
Well,
At
that
least
may be
I am.
scarier. Might be better seeing the screen. In any event, so that's that gives you an idea about the revenue picture. And I really think that iLottery, it's the future of the lottery. If the lottery is going to continue to generate revenue, the expected revenue for the education fund, that's the direction we should go in, and many other states, not just New Hampshire, have already gone. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Virginia, all have iLottery at present and are having great success with it. And I will say on the sports betting front that the states that have added that as well, Tennessee is one of the most recent states, and they're just going gangbusters basically in those states that have legalized sports betting. So that would be again, something that people can do and are doing. And, you know, it's back to, do we make it legal and regulate it and make revenue for the state, or do we leave it where it is? I see Senator Hardy has a question.
Thank you. And can you guys hear me okay? Because I got a message from Faith that she was having a hard time hearing me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Gary, I already told you I had a concern about the problem betting, and, you know, one of the raps on gambling is that it demographically often is done by people who may not have the money to lose. I don't know if that's true. And so I'm just wondering if you have any demographic information somehow of people who traditionally play the games that are currently legal, and if you have any projections about how the demographic, you already mentioned that it might hit a younger crowd, but just sort of demographic information about people who play and whether you see any concerns in that.
Sure. Well, I do have some demographic information that I can get for you related to present lottery games. And I do think there is that perception that the people who play can't afford to play, or hoping this is going to change their life, and, you know, they're spending money where they shouldn't. I will say that before I was in this role, legally now I'm not allowed to play any of the lottery games. I'm excluded from the lottery, although I will say I have absolutely no control over what the numbers are that are going to be drawn, or what ticket is a winning ticket, but I still cannot play. Neither can anyone else in the department. But, you know, I look at it, I'm a skier and I buy a season's pass. I think that's a wise investment for me. I live right near the ski hills. So, you know, to me, I get out often enough that it's worthwhile, but I don't usually pay attention to what a ticket costs. But I went with a friend recently, and the day ticket price was $165. Somebody who goes with their family of 4, you know, that's a lot of money. Someone who finds it, and that's what they find entertaining. I guess we could all say that's great. It's outside, it's exercise, they get some fresh air. Still, it's a lot of money. Somebody who finds entertainment playing the lottery, I guess you know, it's their money, they're adults. And if this is how they want to spend their money, that's their choice. If they have an addiction problem, we want to make sure that we provide treatment for them and hope we can get them into that treatment. That's really the goal in the end. We don't want people to play in a way that isn't just for entertainment. That's really what it comes down to. Do people take this seriously? Absolutely, they do. And we hope people will play responsibly, and we try to remind people of that all the time. Next month, the whole month of advertising is really focused on responsible gaming and trying to remind people of that as well. We do the same around the holidays. We want to make sure people aren't giving lottery tickets to kids, you know, in their stockings, that sort of thing. So we you know, we're really trying. I do think the biggest change is this funding of this grant to provide treatment to anyone who wants it. Because if you need treatment and you spend all your money gambling, you probably don't have the money to pay for the treatment. So we don't want that to be an obstacle for people to be able to get the treatment. So that's really the biggest and most dramatic change in the time I've been there. And certainly if we do any of these expansions, that social responsibility component is going to be highlighted. Whether it's an iLottery, again, we'll know who's playing and how much, and we can target messages to them. And I think that's a big improvement over where we are now. But I can get you the demographic information. I can ask to see if there's other demographic. I think sports betting really attracts just a wide range. I mean, from conferences I've been to and reading that I've done, it's just a wide range of people from, you know, very different socioeconomic backgrounds. Very wealthy people like to bet on sports. I mean, people like sports. You can modulate your bet. You know, you can bet a few dollars, you can bet hundreds of dollars, you can bet hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know a few years ago when the Patriots were in the Super Bowl, and Rhode Island was one of the few states that had lottery sports betting. It was very upside down, one-sided, very lopsided. Everybody in New England was betting on the Patriots, and they really wanted to have some money on the other side. And a gentleman from New Jersey offered to come with a bag full of cash to place a bet against the Patriots, and they accepted it in the end, just to try to balance things up a little bit. But I think they did tell me in the end the Patriots won, and they lost their shirt on that particular game, which is, you know, one thing that can happen in sports betting, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
I'll
I would-
send you information.
That would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other
Okay.
questions?
Other questions? Senator Sirotkin.
Could you just, Gary, to the extent you think it's of value, could you give us a history of what was going on legally with sports betting that all of a sudden, like, what is it, 6 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled and that opened up, you now say how many states have legalized sports betting?
Number has been growing, so I don't have the precise number in front of me, but I can get you that. But it continues to grow with states. Colorado added recently. I mentioned Tennessee is the most recent, and a number of other states have bills presently before their legislatures to legalize sports betting. But that Supreme Court decision is what opened up sports betting to the states essentially, and it's just kind of gone on since then. The fantasy sports that you mentioned in the bill that had come out before, a lot of that was a precursor by these companies to get people that were already engaged, interested in sports, playing on the fantasy side, with the expectation that when sports betting became legal, they would convert over to betting on the games themselves. And the game. I'm sorry.
No, that begs the question is, what is all this a precursor to? Because I will say, former administrations have not been as enthusiastic about gambling as this administration appears to be.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that there's anything else necessarily after this with these, we had this modernization and expansion, the modernization being the iLottery, the addition of Keno and sports betting. I don't know that there's, being involved in the industry for the last 2.5 years or so, I don't think there's anything else right there on the horizon beyond these things for gambling, essentially. I think the administration's perspective is these activities are happening. We might as well regulate it and protect our citizens and make some revenue from it. That's really what it comes down to. I think it's a very practical approach, honestly, rather than just let people just do whatever they want, anyway. And they're not saying to themselves, well, Vermont doesn't have a legal sports betting environment, so I just won't do it. Because probably people aren't sure whether it's legal or not, and they can find their way to sites that would be happy to take their money on sports betting, essentially. And Keno would be an addition. To be fair, that's the game we don't have now. But other states that have had it, and again, Massachusetts has had it for a long time, New Hampshire for several years. I don't think it's raising, particular concerns, or at least I haven't heard them. It is another, opportunity for people to bet, but, it doesn't seem like anyone was concerned, and rarely hear it spoken about the break open tickets and the, tens and tens of millions of dollars every year that are involved with that. And the money's just invisible. And I don't hear the concern there. If there's concern on the lottery doing it, or the state being engaged with it, I think it should be equally concerning, or maybe more so in the end, in that it is essentially unregulated cash business of a huge amount, huge percentage of what the lottery is.
Senator Cummings, I would say I hear you on past administrations, but the world has changed over many times since those last administrations. If we were the first ones out on marijuana, it might have been different if we were the first ones out on sports gambling. But since the Supreme Court decision, a lot of states have passed laws, and the infrastructure is very sophisticated, and we can learn lessons from those other states. It's a different world right now.
Any other questions at this point? Senator Pearson, does our hand move? Okay. Well, thank you. I see Brian Evans is here, but Brian, I assume you're back up too. You don't have separate testimony?
Just supporting Gary and Patrick.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right. Senator Bray has a question.
Yeah, I think this questions I've been sort of thinking about it during the whole presentation off and on. How does the commission, there's a regular concern expressed about gambling is that it ends up becoming, it's regressive. It raises money for a good end, but that it's regressive. So how does the commission, I'm sure you've heard that, how does the commission think about that regressivity aspect of gambling and gambling revenues?
Well, I think from the administration's perspective, this isn't a tax. This is a voluntary, entertainment activity that adults in the state can choose to participate in the end. And it's not being forced on anyone. It's an optional activity that if people find it engaging, whether that's Keno or scratch tickets or draw games or sports betting, it's just, it's how they want to spend their time and the money that they earn in the end. And I don't know if there's a better answer to that. I mean, it's not mandating anyone pay anything. If you're interested in any of these activities, they're available. That's basically
right. Well, it makes sense. It's just, I'm thinking, I'm not 140 years old, and somehow in my lifetime we've gone from, when you talked about gambling and drugs, it was of the Vice Squad when I was a kid. Now it's a Department of State government. So,
well, and I'm not old enough to remember Prohibition either, but that alcohol sales were formerly banned in the country everywhere. But we're actually in the business now with a social responsibility mission, which I think is really important. The difference between how we sell alcohol and how it's done in the open market. We really don't look at ourselves as drug pushers. We want people to consume it responsibly. That's really what it's about, and we hammer on that message all the time. That's an important part of it. Do people not do that? There definitely are people that have a problem with the substance. There's no question about it. I was a criminal prosecutor for about 10 years, and an awful lot of the cases that I prosecuted came from people who overconsumed alcohol and had the wrong kind of effect on them. But it's a legal substance, and we do what we can to try to educate our gatekeepers, the people that sell it, and that we want them to do it responsibly and make sure they're not selling to people that are already impaired by alcohol. So I think that's what the state can do
Sure.
Try to make it work.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments? All right, this was a little less active than previous discussions of gambling, so I guess perhaps attitudes are mellowing. So we will, that's it for today. If there are no more questions, I think as I'm planning agendas, I'm going to think about cutting the break back to 15 minutes. And then, because we suddenly have a bunch of bills, and as we were reminded in chairs, yes, well, whatever day this week we did chairs, that crossover is fast approaching. So next week we're going to go through those bills. We've got some tomorrow. We're going to take a look at those and go forward with it. If there is a bill, Senator Sirotkin, I assume all the gambling will start in your committee and then come to us because it's a revenue. But I don't know that there's a bill yet.
There will be bills. I know Senator Sears and I have one bill that somewhere it's caught up in the drafting process. You recall last year there was a bill to actually get going, and then there was a study committee bill. I don't know which one would move, but they both came to my committee last year. I'm not sure the study committee bill came to finance, but it did pass the full Senate. So, but it was just a study. So
studies go to appropriations because they take money.
Right. I think that's what happened, and they passed it out, and the Senate passed it out. I think there was one no vote.
I think the governor will probably have someone introducing a bill, which is the way it usually works, probably in the House. Senator Hardy.
Yeah, just first of all, thank you, Gary. Your testimony was really helpful to me. and ease some of the concerns I had last year about the bills that were on the table. So I really appreciate you taking the time today. And Senator Cummings, I think we asked this question before, but since it's my first year in the committee, there will be a miscellaneous tax bill, or won't there, in case there are some miscellaneous taxes we may or may
There's
not.
nothing titled a miscellaneous tax bill. I think our guests can go if they'd like now. This is turning into committee discussion.
I just want
Thank
to
you.
thank you very much for allowing us the time to talk about this and provide more information. And if you have more questions, please feel free to reach out, and we're happy to provide you with the best answers that we can get. And again, I'll share the PowerPoint with Faith, and you all have it, and I'll get you the demographic information on my.
Okay. Thank you very much. This was a
you,
very
everybody.
thorough presentation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
There isn't a bill titled miscellaneous tax usually. The tax department usually has a housekeeping bill. DFR or one of theirs, banking insurance, usually has a housekeeping bill. They're usually for small changes, but it tends to get decorated because it has the word tax, and that's a very broad category for things that come up that if you send them out on a single bill, the chance that they'd make it through are not great. I've got one that's brought to my attention about fees that we charge pharmaceutical companies if they introduce a new drug into the system. It's through the Attorney General. They have to report it, so we know when there's a $2 million, prescription being introduced. But we got the timing off. Apparently, they have to pay the first of the year, but not report until April. And so they tend to pay, and then if they don't introduce anything, we have to return the money. And for some reason, these are paper checks. And the request is, could we just coordinate? No change in policy. Could we just fix the dates? That's not going to be a standalone bill. So you'll see that. If it doesn't make it into budget adjustment, it'll, it's that kind of thing.
And I don't know if there's the potential for a committee bill or what everybody else's appetite is. We haven't had a broader discussion, but after hearing all these reports and everything, I'm just curious what people's thoughts are. If there are things that, there's the tax structure committee, there was the tax, whatchamacallit report, now that I'm blanking on the name, that, okay, it's the end of the day and I'm tired, but so I can't, the JFO came in and gave us the, anyway, there are just a lot of things. We haven't had broader discussion about tax policy. I'm curious what everyone thinks. And maybe Friday when we have committee discussion, we could talk about it.
Tax bills traditionally, if not constitutionally, there seems to be some, but revenue bills start in the House. And they have all day. So we usually, there is a cattail hanging in the middle, and now it's disappearing into the cows. It is truly distracting. The glories of Zoom. We usually amend what gets sent to us as we go through and reach decisions. The House worked a long time on trying to do the income tax adjustments to the original Blue Ribbon Tax Commission. This one doesn't have anywhere near the structural work. I don't know what they'll do with that. The property tax is definitely going to take some discussion if we think that's worth discussing at all, that's our choice, but that would probably be the big one. The extend sales tax to other products is, and services. I think it has had discussion. We may do it. You start getting hit with, you're going to tax my kids' haircuts. And probably it would have to be a whole package, and probably something would take us till next year to put together,
Okay.
to make it all the way through the process. This may not be the best time to increase taxes on folks, maybe, but we will definitely get deeper into that discussion.
Okay.
Senator McDonald, I don't know where you are, but you were fading in and out of the snow. I think I'm seeing your hand up. And now you're muted, Senator, which is good.
Thank you. I think what Senator Harding was asking is, will our colleagues on Ways and Means Committee send a bill over that might serve as an emergency vehicle, and have it, we could park it in the driveway, and with the understanding that should it be necessary, we can go charge the battery and start it up.
Right. And I'm assuming they will. They're still, I know they've put out a property tax, a yield bill, just to let schools know we're not looking at 9 cents off the top. We're looking more like 2 cents. I still haven't figured out where the one-time money is, if it's still sitting on the bottom. There's a lot of questions about the money the schools are getting individually and how much leadership they're getting in how they might most constructively use that. There's a couple bills, I guess, talking about testing in schools for hazards, but last year, I'm sure, and Ed, you heard that if a certain sports complex had passed, the smaller schools, at least one of whom has sewage in the basement, would end up paying for that. So how do we deal with school construction? And if we're going to be testing for the chemicals that have closed down Burlington High School, and that testing, I gather, is expensive. And then what do we do when we find out? So that's being done. We're actually going to have the ed chairs into money chairs meet on Wednesdays for just an update. And we will be talking to them about what their thoughts are and what our concerns are. Because in 2 years, we will be back to where we are now, and swallowing $30 million more in pension costs in the ed fund, which will be an ongoing expense every year. And this year, we had enough revenue to cover it, but it will hurt 2-3 years hence. So we can do right now, because this is the first year, we can do a committee bill, or we can find the other place I think we're going to do a bill is somewhere in telecom. And I'm hoping Senator Brock, who came and left, I don't know where he's gone now, has a vehicle that we can. So right now we're just doing some general updating and fact finding, and then we'll start focusing down into bills and to bills that we may want to put out. But I want to focus. And any area you'd like to do some more delving in, let me know, and let me know who you'd like to have. And we'll see where that goes. Senator Bray, did you have your hand up?
Yes, ma'am. So we're taking testimony next week in Natural Resources and Energy on the whole PCB in school thing, but we'll be talking with ANR and Department of Health. So we're not going to be talking about the financial implications so much as just trying to get the science down of what's going on and a sense of whether or not, because they already did some limited sampling of PCBs like 2 years ago. Senator Baruth was saying, is Burlington High School the canary in the mine shaft, that there's a whole generation of schools of this, this vintage that are going to have the same problem. And so we'll ask about that. So we may have something helpful to share when we get around to that.
Because that was another part of the discussion, is that just during this age of school that certain products might have been used. The other one that's still hanging out there is radon, which isn't a difficult test. You probably have to do a couple around a school. And that wouldn't have been an issue until we started tightening the schools up, just like it really wasn't in houses until we started tightening them up and it couldn't evaporate through the holes in the roof. So that's another one that's hanging out there, and that has nothing to do with the age of the school. It's whether or not if you've got the big granite boulders in the basement, you might be more likely to have a problem, but it's whether or not you're sitting on a pocket of gas.
Right. So we are actually, while they're in, we're going to check in more generally about radon, lead, but PCBs is driving the conversation at the moment.
Yes, it is. And so I think our jurisdiction really would be to have a discussion about school construction or major renovations. I'm personally disappointed that we didn't use $14 million worth of COVID funds, and that all of those old schools didn't get new HVAC systems to circulate the air.
A lot of them did. We provided a lot of money for that purpose, and
got some.
A lot of it was supply chain and timing issues that prevented it. But I think there's still money that they're trying to spend.
We're trying to see what kind of leadership is going on right now to help the schools think through a lot of how you do this. And it was very disturbing to hear the Nathan Lavery from the school fiscal officers say some of them were afraid to use the money because they were afraid it might get clawed back. And I believe the state has said it'll get clawed back, but from us, we're not going to go out after any of the people we give money to because of the way they used it. So,
well, I just wanted to sort of what Senator McDonald said about, are we going to have a car parked in the driveway that we can use if we need to? Wanting to make sure we had a vehicle, and it sounds like we will, because I was debating whether to introduce a tax bill, but it sounds like we'll have vehicles if we do decide to do any.
I mean, if you've got a major thing that you want to, introduce, that's fine.
Okay. All right.
The administration, if there tends to not want to send us a lot of tax bills because they don't like that word probably as much as we do.
They're worried about what we might do with them. So
that's right. And they know our tendency to decorate. So we will keep going on this. Senator Bray.
Yeah. So since we're talking about schools, it's reminding me of a question I've been thinking about is how are we sorting out the the pension issue? Is that going to be finance and GovOps, or who goes first?
No
What's the
one
play
has
there?
said, I believe it will be GovOps will be the lead on that. I don't know. No one has spoken to me about our role in that. We do have the treasurer coming in on Friday to go over her take on the pension. Or maybe, am I looking at an old agenda? I know she couldn't make it one day and we were moving things around, so don't hold.
She's coming in on Thursday.
On Thursday, okay, we did move her.
Who is the
The
treasurer?
treasurer,
Oh, good. Yes, I have a lot of questions for her.
okay, and
Tomorrow? Is that what I?
yes, yeah, tomorrow is Thursday, yeah. So we'll do that, and I will ask the pro tem what the plan is. Sometimes with in the past, with major bills, they've been divvied up and each committee has been given a section to work on. I don't know if this one is that
What are you doing?
divided. It's not revenue. Our hold is the least tenuous probably, because the Probst has to come up with the money. Unless we decide we're going to raise the money somewhere else. And I know Senator Hooker has a bill in on that.
Right. Well, I don't think, looking at the budget and thinking back, I mean, 2 years ago, I guess it was, we figured out how to come up with $30 million to overpay our obligation to reduce costs in a big way. Like, I think it saved us, what, 100 million long run?
Oh, that was one-time money. Yes, that's
right.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have any one-time money being applied that way this year.
Well,
Is that correct?
this is a different, the one-time money is getting applied to the bill we are paying off for our past sins of underfunding. And I am not clear on what date, but they changed the government accounting standards and it was not allowable anymore to underfund, with the understanding that you paid out what you had to pay out, it might be out of this year's funding. And we got hit not only with the requirement that we fully fund, but with interest and penalties. And that's where we put, yes, that was a fight over putting it into the property tax or and we put it into the pension because the interest keeps accruing on that unmet amount that we have to pay in plus penalties. So I think we saved 100 million in 10 years by paying down, it's like paying down your mortgage. We've got a mortgage, but this pension issue, as I understand it, is we've been funding it. We thought it was adequately funded, and they recalculated the demographics and the return on investment. And that's all of a sudden, we don't have the money, enough money is what's happening.
Right.
And Senator Brock probably has a better handle on this, but that 0.5% going down in the return on investment caused that $30 million every year hit to the ed fund. And that's going to hurt when we don't have COVID money or stimulus to cover it. Senator Brock.
That's the tip of the iceberg. What there are two things I think that made this happen. The first was the underfunding that we did was the late 90s and the early 2000s, and that caught up with us. Even though we've been fully funding lately. But the downward estimate of what the return on the pension fund was grossly, in my opinion, overdue. And I have a real question as to whether it's too high now. None of us, if you plan your savings, expect to achieve a 7% annual return over the next 30 years. I mean, none of us expect that. Nobody that I know expects that. And the
Bobby Starr does.
but when you have a rate like that, if it's too high and you finally adjust it to what you think is a reasonable, rational rate, then the amount of money that you have to have in order to put away every year increases. And that's what happened. We went from 7.5 to 7. And the real question is 7 too high? A lot of states, do have that, no question about it. But that's the source of our problem. And then lastly, these defined benefit plans are unsustainable. And the private sector got rid of them 30 plus years ago. I started formally as an employee with Fidelity in the 1980s, and it was gone then.
That is the ongoing debate, and it's been going on here since before I was here. I was on a commission. So that one, we will have lots of time to discuss. We are still on live, but we're losing members of the committee. So I think this is it. We have got discussion time in on agendas and things we'd like on Friday. And so I'll talk to you all then. Write down your questions.
Okay.
This the last
was,
chance to get something snarky in before we quit, tired and.
It's never your chance to get something. It's to get something snarky in, Senator.
I was catching the emails today.